Let's bring in Bruce Heyman to the conversation, former U.S. ambassador, of course, to Canada, author of the book, The Art of Diplomacy, Strengthening the Canada-U.S. Relationship in Times of Uncertainty. And that would certainly count as now uncertainty. Bruce, what do you think about this? Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. I look at this in two windows. The first is I think it's a fulfillment of the international obligation. And I think that's important for the U.S.-Canada relationship going forward and the rule of law. And so I think it's very important that the rule of law stood here and will stand going forward in terms of our abilities to do extradition under the guise of this particular case. I'm not an attorney, but I do believe that that's really important, as I was ambassador during a time when there were extradition issues with Chinese national held in Vancouver. So a similar case, but not with the same kinds of implications. But the second point is that if you thought things were complicated between Canada, U.S., and China before today, they have just escalated significantly, not only because of this case, but because of what's happening in Hong Kong and what Secretary Pompeo announced earlier today in terms of not viewing Hong Kong as this autonomous region anymore, and the potential outcomes for that make it very complicated. And I think the third thing is that as the president failed in the United States in terms of having us tackle this pandemic and tackling it effectively, he's going to continue to use China as a scapegoat all the way through until November. And I think he will continue to dial up the poking, the difficulties between the U.S. and China with sanctions, with voice, with Twitter, with everything he can do, so he deflects anything from himself.
Yeah, we're just going to show the decision again here, the extradition ruling, Bruce, as you were talking to us, just what was at stake, the double criminality. You know, are her alleged crimes in the U.S. considered a crime in Canada? The answer was yes, and that's why the extradition will proceed. What do you think the reaction is going to be, Bruce, honestly speaking, from China?
Well, China has found a particular unique moment in time during this pandemic where they are in a much different place than I think the United States is. They also recognize that the United States, with Donald Trump, is taking a go-it-alone process as opposed to the collaborative, geopolitical, multilateral approach that the Obama team took with TPP and the like. And so Canada is just unfortunately caught in the middle of this, being our next door neighbor and our largest trading partner and our ally, and also a partner and trading partner with China, but not nearly to the same degree. I think the Chinese are going to dial this up. They clearly have the penchant for risk here, as they demonstrated with Hong Kong in this last week.
Well, I know we're going to see a lot of anger and outrage. That's pretty much a foregone conclusion by the Chinese, who are also going to see this as Canada being a lapdog to the United States. Certainly that's going to be the perception on the part of some in China.
Unfortunately, that's the case. I think Canada operates much more independently than the description that you just gave. That being said, the realities of being our neighbor, our border partner, our largest trading partner, at least in terms of energy and goods and services and things that we make together, your largest trading partner by 75% of your exports. And so given that, and given the nature of things, I think China is going to twin the two of us and continue to do that now going forward.
Is there an off-ramp here, Bruce, at any point in the near future, or is this just the road we're on?
Boy, I think the off-ramp's the first week of November, and I think it's changing at the White House. But look, let's just be realistic here. Presidents tend to get reelected in the United States. And so I'm going to work hard to try to make a change to bring back some normalcy here. And I think that's going to be your off-ramp. Unfortunately, I do think things are going to escalate between now and then. And you see the behavior of the president, which I think he feels the pressure of the election, and he's becoming more erratic and irresponsible every day. And so you should just expect anything as possible.
We're going to show some live pictures as well, Bruce, as you and I are speaking, just to show our viewers some of the protesters who are in Vancouver, outside of the law courts there in the downtown core of Vancouver, saying clear red penetration, extradition of Meng Wanzhou, stop Huawei, free the Canadians Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavor. One person, in fact, is flying a U.S. flag as well. I'm curious, sort of all the anger we're seeing in not only your country, but even to a certain extent in Canada, where as a result of what happened with the pandemic, the way the Chinese handled it or mishandled it back in January, as the case may be, you're seeing growing anger at China. Certainly this issue for our country, Meng Wanzhou and those two Michaels, as we've come to call them, it's become a huge thorn in relations as well. And you're starting to see more and more pushback, even domestically in Canada, against China.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I think the Chinese could have handled this much better, been much more communicative, opened up the kimono a bit and told us what was happening so that we in the world could be much better prepared. And that all being said, the division between the U.S. and China was happening before the pandemic actually took place. And you saw the actions and reactions the president was having on again, off again, and the statements of a trade deal and how he operated with tariffs with them. I will tell you that this only escalates that. And I think people from all parties in the United States and around the world are looking for some answers to why China behaved the way they did at the early end of this pandemic. And everybody is so emotional now, and the president is stoking these divisions. And so I'm really concerned that this can be a summer of discontent in the United States, and this is going to be the subject du jour.
And obviously with Huawei, trying to expand globally, this is going to sour things. We already know that the strong opinion the Trump administration has said about not wanting key U.S. allies to have any business with Huawei. They do, of course, do business in our country. We'll see whether that now changes as a result of this. But I'm curious, sort of, this process is going to go on in our country. This woman will have to face, no doubt, a lengthy extradition process. Then if she gets into the United States, she will then face, of course, fraud trial there. So, we could be talking about years from now, Bruce, before this is resolved one way or the other for Meng Wanzhou.
That's exactly the case. And I do believe that the conflict that is we're here, we're in it, and will escalate between the United States and China will be over manufacturing and technological ownership. And so the U.S. is going to want to stake its territory with its allies and probably put a lot of pressure on allies going forward on what equipment and what technology you're going to buy, not just Huawei, but other technologies you're going to buy from China. And so there's going to be this breakdown of these alliances in the world, those that support China and are their allies, those that support the United States and its allies. But it's hard when Donald Trump has harmed the relationship with allies so much to get them all to go along. So the thing that Donald Trump had working in his favor, though, is this pandemic affected everybody, and everybody's equally upset with China to some degree or another over this, over the pain and suffering that has occurred.
And does this story, Bruce, sort of what's happening with Meng Wanzhou and Canada caught between the U.S. and China, does it become sort of like one chapter in sort of a larger story about what could be the next Cold War between the U.S. and China?
I think you've nailed it that nail right on the head. I will say that this is as painful as this is for you at this moment, especially the two Michaels who are being held in China, which we all want to come home, that this is going to be one piece in a larger puzzle of this complex relationship between these two superpowers and, the desire to control whatever space that they want to control going forward. And depending on the presidency and depending on where we go, how that path will go it could be very challenging for a country like Canada.
And one last question, in terms of that relationship, you mentioned November. I mean, there's so many layers to this, Bruce, it's hard to keep up. But, the presidential election in November, I mean, we in Canada following it closely, I know you are as well. Is that an opportunity to reset a lot of this?
Oh, absolutely. So I can say this with deep conviction. I was in Vancouver with Joe Biden. I was in Ottawa with Joe Biden. Joe Biden swore me in. I have a personal relationship with him. I know how he feels about Canada. I know how he feels about multilateral relations and the importance of allies. I can tell you there will be no better president at this time than Joe Biden would be for the U.S.-Canada relationship and a reset and repairing of some of the damage that's been done. And the one way that we can get this done is if there are any Americans living in Canada that are listening today, you need to register and vote and participate in this election. And this is your moment in time. And you can go to fvap.gov and get those forms, and you can vote in the United States if you're a U.S. citizen. And please, this is the moment. You need to do this. We can all American citizens need to come together and right the ship at this moment.
Bruce Heyman in Chicago, former U.S. ambassador to Canada, with his take on the Meng Wanzhou case and this developing news. Thank you, Bruce. Good to see you again. Good to talk to you.
Good to see you. Thanks, everyone. Be healthy, everyone, please.